Hello, everyone. How are we all doing today? Good? Let's hear a story. At 13 days old, I was generally doing what most 13-day infants do: eating, sleeping, pooping, and looking cute. However, something momentous also occurred on that day. My parents got me my first library card. Naturally, I couldn't quite read that early on in life, but my mother started reading to me when I was an infant, and books were my window into a better future. For us, books represented education, and education was the window to a better life. So naturally, when we emigrated from South Africa to the United States, and we were confronted with a world drastically different from the one we came, I turned to books for comfort. I had always felt that growing up, I never really fit into any prescribed societal category. On one end, I identified as South African, and on another, I was also Gujarati. Many times, I had to recount a lot of family history to explain how Indians can be from Africa. In a two-word summary, colonial empire. But when I went to libraries, it was like a whole new world opened up just for me. Captivated by the alluring scent of old and new books mingled together, lined unevenly on the shelves. Bright colors and cursive fonts, bringing forth stories of the shores of Pondicherry and Life of Pi to the magic of Hogwarts and Harry Potter. I felt like I belonged. To this day, I still get that same thrill of excitement every time I walk into a library. It's because each fantasy story I pick up from the shelves transports me completely into the world encapsulated within its pages. If Pai Patel from Life of Pi was sitting on a lifeboat, dehydrated and afraid, with a tiger named Richard Parker walking towards him, I could feel my own heart palpating through my chest with that same fear. If Harry Potter felt that sort of bittersweet, familial love and loss as he gazed upon his family in the Mirror of Erised, I felt it too. Fiction offered the promise that I could live those hundreds of lives over and over again, even when I couldn't transport myself into those pages directly. But the most beautiful allure of fiction, and in particular fantasy, was that the characters in these novels defied characterization too. Many of these stories were set in worlds vastly different from our own, with goblins, elves, talking lions, speaking different languages, and adopting different cultures. Through each character's life and experiences, I learned to love and understand each character so deeply that I felt that they were my friends too. That sense of kinship I felt in reading fantasy is not an isolated phenomenon. I'm sure you've all read stories that have resonated with you years and years later, whether it was because of a character that you resonated strongly with, or because of the message of a novel that spoke to your soul. Growing up in the era of Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, I knew that fantasy held a sort of magical appeal for people of all ages and all backgrounds. What I didn't know was that the benefit that reading fantasy would have on developing my own sense of empathy as well. According to a 2022 study by Shiota and Nomura called Role of Fantasy in Emotional Clarity and Emotional Regulation, a preliminary study published in the journal Frontiers of Psychology, Fantasy, which was defined as the experience of identifying with characters in movies, novels, plays, and other fictional situations, enhances a cognitive process called metacognition. Metacognition, in turn, is defined as the ability to become more in tune with monitoring and evaluating our own experiences and emotions. Essentially, metacognition means thinking about the way we think. In the study, participants completed a survey called the Interpersonal Reactivity Index. And it found that individuals that were able to cognitively place themselves in the situation would experience, in the situation of experiencing and feeling what a character in a fictional situation would experience, scored higher on two key metrics of metacognition called clarity and repair, thus enhancing their overall metacognitive abilities. Additionally, in a 2023 systematic review by Ratanjee and Shagafe called The Effects of Reading and Watching Fiction on the Development of Social Cognition, a systematic review published in the journal Dementia and Neuropsychology, reading fiction actually activates a part of your brain called the default network, which is responsible for supporting our capacity for stimulation. Simulation is, quote, experiencing realities outside the here and now, including hypothetical events, distant worlds, and other people's subjective experiences. Sort of like living through a video game in your own head. The visual representation, which can be initiated by things like thought, reading, or other mediums, allows you to create vivid physical scenes, people, and minds that are not directly present in the world in front of you. So overall, what does this research tell us? Well, it means that when we partake in fantasy, we are enhancing both our metacognition and ability to simulate realities different from our own. As medical students and budding healthcare professionals, nurturing this skill set can help us develop empathy, social cognition, and most importantly, resilience. This can provide us with a way to rejuvenate during our very limited spare time. It can also help us relate more deeply to our current and future patients by reminding us that a patient's history and patient's chart is never stagnant. It is always a living, breathing story itself. If I could go back in time, I would tell that younger version of myself, Rakhi, it's okay to pick up that book and be whisked into another dimension. Rakhi, it is okay to sit down on a summery Sunday afternoon, letting the words of J.R.R. Tolkien build hobbits and heroes in my brain. So I challenge all of you, pick up a book, watch a fantasy show, let those stories enrich your life and transform the way you think. Create more empathy today by putting yourself in a character's shoes and walking around for a minute, an hour, maybe even a whole day. Thank you so much.